With 13 seasons, not to mention a revival that's been in the works, King of the Hill is definitely still one of the most iconic adult cartoons. And today we're grilling up a ranking of every character from worst to best on our King of the Hill tier list, powered by that clean burning propane.
Oh yeah!
And now, while King of the Hill is a remarkably well-written show, we do have to begin with the F tier, reserved for those minor characters we just couldn't stand. Starting with Luann's parents, Leanne and Hoyt Platter. Both of these two were delegated to single-episode appearances that do a great job of illustrating just how much they both absolutely suck. Leanne is a short-tempered, violent alcoholic who abuses and attempts murder on her partners. She also refuses to be a mother to Luann, treating her like a friend at best and a burden at worst. And as for Hoyt, his appearance doesn't come until season 12 in the episode Life, a Loser's Manual. A very accurate name, by the way. And here he crashes with the Hills, convinces Luann to loan him some cash, and worst of all, guilt trips Lucky into taking the fall for a robbery. These two are the essence of deadbeat parents. But next is a character we feel slightly more sympathetic towards, Caleb. The obnoxious son of Hank's pushover neighbor and Hank's bully. And we only rank him second to last because he's a kid. I'm sure Caleb has the potential to grow up to be a perfectly okay guy, but thanks to his spineless parents, he sees no issue with constantly harassing his middle-aged neighbor. I mean, he messed up Hank's lawn, and you just don't mess with a man's lawn. But the worst thing about Caleb is that his idea of an insult is
Dusty old bones full of green dust.
like, why green specifically? And how would bones be dusty? Honestly, your insults are just bad, Caleb. If you're gonna harass somebody, at least do it right. And you see, now this is how you harass someone. Look at Mrs. Wakefield. Like Caleb, she comes from a pretty infamous episode. Mrs. Wakefield is widely regarded as one of the worst episodes of the entire series. But whether you agree with that sentiment or not, you have to admit that Hank had every right to be weirded the heck out by this strange old woman's insistence on dying in his house. The whole town practically bullied poor Hank into letting her die in the middle of a freaking Christmas party. It's one of those episodes where Hank is, like, the only somewhat reasonable character.
Please, Hank, let Ms. Wakefield die in my house.
I guess the ending where he invites her over to not die is kinda sweet, but, like, she never appears again. She might be dead, but we don't accept excuses on this channel. They say there's got to be a morning after, and the morning of this next spot goes to General Gum.
Be a morning after.
We'll give him this. He's a decent father to Ming. Thoughtful enough to get her cute little elephant figurines from his travels. He's also a total bully to his son-in-law, however, and spends his entire first and only appearance tormenting him for every little thing. His ego is the absolute essence of narcissism, and he's one of those characters who contributes literally nothing to the show except for being a total jerk. Heck, he doesn't even get the typical heartwarming ending you'd expect from the show in his episode. The best thing this character does is literally just go away. And rounding out our F tier, we have the lady who, in my opinion, just does not deserve William Fontaine de la Tour d'Autrive, Lenore. Really, what is there to say about this woman? Her whole character is literally just a justification for how depressing Bill's life is. She cheated on him, broke his heart in the divorce, then tried to break his heart again when he briefly hooked up with Governor Ann Richards. I'm not saying she's a cheating, lying gold digger with few redeeming qualities. We're saying she's a cheating, lying gold digger with no redeeming qualities. But now we move into the characters who have at least some redemptive moments and qualities. These are the D tier characters. Starting with Delia from the episode Escape from Party Island. If you're wondering why we even bothered mentioning such a minor character, it's because this episode, which sees Hank chauffeuring his mother and her nursing home loyalty club members on a trip to a ceramic figurine museum, is one of the most secondhand irritating episodes of the whole show. Delia is easily the most abrasive of the bunch, which leads to her being both the funniest and most grating old lady in that car. But to her credit, she also led to one of our favorite Hank Hill quotes in the whole show.
Which one of you is Delia?
She is.
I could commit you like that.
Next up, we have Dee Dee Hill, the new wife of Cotton Hill. Their marriage is based on the purest form of love, a nice butt and a man short enough to enjoy it. You'd think that Dee Dee would have more opportunity to shine, given that she's married to her former kindergarten classmate's father.
Oh, she is not my mother. Hell, we went to kindergarten together.
But Dee Dee doesn't really have all that much to her. She really is just Cotton's wife. She also loses some serious points for that one episode where she forces Bobby to raise her and Cotton's baby. Moving on to Coach Cleamer. He's the coach. Like, remember that one episode where he coached? Or the one that he has a funny voice, I guess, so moving on.
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's talk about Connie's cousin, Tid Powell, who only appeared one time in season 7. And it's a shame because as the polar opposite of her well-behaved cousin, she made for a pretty interesting plotline. With Bobby's help and a bit of middle school seduction, she works to cook drugs to pay off her debts back home. After she was exposed, Con sent her to work with her uncle, which hopefully turned her life around, and honestly, it would have been interesting to see the end result in a future episode. Moving on to Emily the Hall Monitor. You know how a series always has those side characters who appear like all the time but you don't even know their name? That's basically her, and she's basically just following the orders of Principal Moss. But it's hard not to resent such an obvious principal's pet. And of course, we also have to rank Principal Moss kinda low as well. He's a bad principal, but not in the Principal Lewis from American Dad sort of way. He's not really a criminal, he's just an incompetent coward. He's willing to jeopardize the health and safety of his students for the sake of covering his own tail, and he never really manages to prove himself in a positive light. Every time he's given the chance to prove that he cares more about his students than his reputation, he just slinks back into his seat. At best, he's a little funny, and at worst, which is most of the time, he's just useless. And with that said, we'll go ahead and move into the characters who are just alright. This is the C tier, and we're gonna start with Nancy Hicks Gribble. Now, I'll say it right off the bat, yes, Nancy really does deserve to be in the F tier. Her character's entire shtick is being a cheating wife who refuses to own up to her misdeeds even years after they've occurred. She has Dale raise the son of her affair partner, and while he's admittedly a decent father, that doesn't take away from how scummy of an action that is overall. She did eventually stop the affair. In one episode, she was told by both a doctor and her mother that she was losing her hair due to the stress of not banging John Redcorn, what's known as hoe pattern baldness. Jokes aside, even with this taken into consideration, Nancy did ultimately decide to stick by Dale for once, which shows that she has changed on some level, and she does have a couple episode arcs that are actually pretty entertaining. Next, we have Tilly Hill, Hank's loving mother. She's not a particularly funny character, but she's pretty much always sympathetic. Honestly, anyone who's had to deal with Cotton as a life partner would be. When Tilly needs help, Hank's best attributes ultimately come out. One of the best scenes to show this comes from the episode where the guys attend a lawnmower focus group, and Hank finally calls out his dad for bad-mouthing his mother.
And if you ever talk about my mom or my mower like that again, you're not welcome in my house.
Moving on to GH, aka
Good Hank.
Man, I like Cotton, but he really was a jerk. The level of pettiness it must take to name your baby as a good version of your own adult son is just crazy. Hilarious, but ridiculous. But to GH's credit, he is a baby, and apparently he's able to fire a gun at age like 0.
He loves to shoot.
And still, GH works so well simply for the good Hank joke. Next up, we have a certified genius and certified boss, Jimmy Witchard. I'm the boss, Jimmy said calmly.
You're the boss, Jimmy. I'm the boss.
You might remember him most prominently from the episode where he was, in fact, a boss. Bobby's boss, to be specific. Granted, he's an absolutely horrendous boss, but he did lead to what was probably Hank's greatest ass-kicking of the entire series. When he orders Bobby to go across a racetrack to give him a soda, Hank summons all of his propane-sourced power to tear down a fence and literally kick Jimmy in the ass several times. They say Hank was only using 10% of his power to do that. Moving on to another sketchy antagonist, Debbie Grund. What's that? Nobody puts Debbie Grund in C tier?
Nobody rejects Debbie Grund!
Well, we just did. Sure, she's an awful person, but the idea of someone accidentally shooting themselves for the sole reason that they wanted some gas station nachos is pretty hilarious. Plus, the episodes revolving around her murder mystery were some of the best in the whole series, so she definitely deserves some points just for that. Let's give a quick mention to Elvin and Mud Dauber, Lucky's friends. These two are ride or dies in the purest sense of the word. If Lucky needs them, or they even suspect that he needs them, they'll be there in seconds. I don't know of anything else particularly striking to say about them, but good friends are invaluable, so we gotta give them some credit. And closing out this section is the very first antagonist of the series, Twig Boy. I'm sure he has a name, but come on, as a fan of the show, I'd be doing this guy a serious disservice if I called him anything but
Twig Boy.
He's the social worker who showed up in the pilot episode to prove that Hank was an unfit father to Bobby, even after his boss specifically told him not to. He even appears again in the episode Junkie Business, where Hank hires a drug addict and is unable to fire him, as long as he's seeking help. You can always count on Twig Boy when you need him, as long as you're trying to take advantage of legal loopholes. Actually, Lucky would be great friends with this dude. Now let's move on to the B tier, for characters who shine almost as bright as a delightfully clean-burning tank of pure propane. First up is Dale's father, Bug Gribble. Of course, he's probably not Dale's biological dad, since it's far likelier that Dale was descended from the same aliens that assassinated JFK. But that's just basic King of the Hill lore, of course. Regardless, biological or not, he and his son had problems in their relationship. Bug also prompted one of the funniest awkward Hank Hill responses in the show.
Are you gay?
No, I sell propane.
Next is a name that strikes terror into the hearts of honest propane salesmen everywhere, Fatherton. All you need to know about this propane peddler is that he's basically an unmasked Buck Strickland. Whereas Buck is a sleazebag who keeps up the appearance of a simple, honest business, Fatherton wears his heart on his sleeve. And it's not a very good heart. He uses dishonest business practices, objectifies his female employees, and takes advantage of everything and everyone that he can to make a quick buck. With all that said though, it is nice to occasionally see Buck offset by someone even shadier than he is. Next up is the head of Arlen First Methodist, Reverend Carol Stroop. She does have her underhanded moments, but Reverend Stroop is usually one of the nicer people in Arlen. When she briefly dates Bill in one episode, she shows genuine love to him and accepts him, warts and all, which frankly we can't say for any other woman he's been with. Stroop is a decent person, even if she's far from the funniest character, and sometimes just being a compassionate person is worth its weight in gold. Next up is a character who's super, just super, Ted Wasanasan.
Please, do not make this awkward.
He's basically the object of envy for Khan's family. As a high-standing member of Nine Rivers Country Club, Khan and Ming are always trying to get into his good graces, which can lead to some pretty funny plot lines. Ted is a two-faced hypocrite, but that's what makes him enjoyable. Like, this is the guy that Khan idolizes. This is the peak of masculinity in Khan's mind. And there's also just something inexplicably funny about his line delivery.
Super.
Guess what? Chicken butt. Oh, and also Buckley's next. He was Luann's boyfriend for the first 2 seasons of the show before he tragically died in an explosion. And my god, that escalated quickly. Thankfully, Buckley didn't really contribute too much to the show before his demise. I mean, he might have had a funny one-liner here and there, but he was just kinda, well, there.
Hey.
That said, the trampoline episode where his angel comes back to give Luann closure was admittedly really sweet, and that's why we rank him as high as we do. And we also have to shout out Octavio real quick. He's basically Dale's go-to guy for all the stuff he can't ask Hank to do. In other words, he's a criminal for hire. A very, very low-ranking criminal. I mean, I guess he's technically making a living and being a loyal friend at the same time, so that's nice. But there's not much else to say about him. Now, if your hair is suddenly blowing gracefully in the wind, it's probably because John Redcorn is up next. But maybe check to make sure your window's closed just in case though. John Redcorn needs no introduction. He's the ever-present healing guru of Nancy Gribble. Despite knowing that she's married, he's willing to help her night after night to be cured of her headaches. An honest guy, truly running an honest business. That said, he's best in small doses. John Redcorn is a character you like seeing here and there as a secondary cast member, but who doesn't really do too much to carry a whole plot on his own. That said, his role in the Dale Gribble character concept, in which the most paranoid conspiracy theorist completely overlooks the most obvious conspiracy happening right in front of him, will never not be hilarious.
Honey, you want a beer?
Yes.
Yes. How did he know I wanted a beer?
Usually Hank's not too fond of hippies, but there are exceptions, like good old Appleseed. When Hank discovers that organic food is, wait for it, good, he naturally teams up with Appleseed to get his go-to food co-op running better than ever. Unfortunately, when Megalomart buys the co-op out, Appleseed has to flee with the cows Hank bought so they'll be able to graze as cows should, and he even names one after Hank. Appleseed is a good guy, and an example of the show being able to portray people very different from Hank in a positive light. Rounding out this category, how about a quick shout out for Hank's coworkers? Joe, Jack, Enrique, Donna, Roger, they're all pretty decent, well-mannered people. Well, except Donna, in that one MySpace episode in particular. Or Enrique, in that episode where he basically stalks the hills and tries to become part of their family. But they all have their likable traits, so it's nice to see them occasionally get bigger roles so they can show their stuff. Personally, I like Enrique. He's a loving family man, and while he gets a bit clingy, it's hard not to sympathize with the poor guy. But now it's time to move one step closer to the best of the best. This is the A tier. And first up we have Gilbert Dauterive. He's the last remaining male of the Dauterive bloodline next to Bill, but the family name will live on, if for no other reason than because of how absolutely iconic this man is.
And sinners always look good.
He only appears in a couple episodes, but his weirdly sultry manner of speaking makes him a fun character to see no matter how short of a time it's for. He's kind of like if you gave Bruce from Family Guy a more prominent role, which honestly is actually a pretty good idea. This might be controversial, but next up is Buck Strickland. Buck is a total sleazebag, and we wouldn't blame you if you expected him to fall much lower on our list. But even if he had no redeeming moments, which is pretty close to true, admittedly, Buck still makes for a great antagonist. He's like an even more shady, underhanded Mr. Krabs, a guy who abuses the loyalty of his loyal employees without any regard for their safety. He throws Hank under the bus for absolutely nothing, and for most of the show, he's basically Mr. Krabs without his, admittedly few, good qualities. But the season 13 Propane Convention episode actually gave him some credit. He's still being a total scumbag for most of the episode, but at the end of it, he uses that dirtbag shtick of his for good.
Then we gonna fix things the way fellas like us fix things.
When Hank gets in trouble for giving a drunken, vomit-filled introduction to Buck on stage, Buck uses the higher-ups' poor impulse control against him. He manages to lure them into a room full of prostitutes, blackmailing them with the threat of exposing the ordeal to their wives, unless they forgive Hank. He's a dirty, sleazy guy, but he's both entertaining and not without his very few redemptive moments. That said, him trying to frame Hank for murder and then laughing it off is maybe one of the darker moments in the show when you really think about it. Now we have arguably the most important of the Hill Clan, Ladybird. What is a man without his loyal steed? Ladybird is a good dog, which shouldn't even need saying, but what really elevates her so high up is just how much Hank loves her. There's something needlessly funny about a man who's famously bad at expressing himself, throwing all that stoicism away because he loves his dog so much.
Ladybird Hill, you're beautiful.
I mean, heck, when Bobby developed an allergy to dogs, Hank built Ladybird a dog mansion to live in. Then he straight up let Bobby live in it instead, so he wouldn't have to be apart from his dog. There's also the fact that Ladybird de-stressed Hank enough for his facilities to allow Bobby to be conceived. So for helping bring Bobby into the world, Ladybird gets a few extra points. Moving on to Connie, Bobby's literal girl next door. As Bobby's brief girlfriend and consistent second best friend, Connie is a loyal companion through and through. She isn't particularly funny or even all that interesting on her own, but it's refreshing to see a character be unapologetically good. Even when Bobby mistreats Connie, like in the Tid Pow episode, she still comes through for him at the end of the day, even if she has to make him sweat a bit first. Also, similarly to Bobby, she deals with a father who's overbearing about her interests and doesn't particularly understand her, which means she makes Con all the better of a character by proxy. And following Connie is her mother, Ming. You could more or less describe Ming as a less aggressively mean Con in terms of personality. But while that's kinda true, Ming is also surprisingly sympathetic at times. She's always there to stick up for her family when the situation demands it, and sometimes she even has a soft spot for her redneck neighbors. We can't forget that she and Dale ended up becoming friends when she used his gun club to help the couple get into Nine Rivers at last. Sure, she briefly betrayed their loyalty, but she came back around by saving them all from prison and staying in their good graces. It's a surprisingly touching moment and shows that she has more to her than meets the eye. And before we move on, can we also talk about how supportive she is of Con? You would think that she would be super materialistic and leave him at the first sign of trouble, but Ming sticks with Con through just about everything. Nearing the end of the A tier is Bobby's best friend, Joseph Gribble. Son of Dale Gribble and John Redcorn, Joseph is a decent source of comic relief, much like his dad. What boosts Joseph up so high is him being such a loyal friend. Being a popular, skilled quarterback, you'd think there'd be some tension between him and Bobby. But Joseph is fairly consistent in his loyalty as a friend. Of course, he can also be very, very creepy, which is typical of a teenager going through puberty and being raised by Dale Gribble. It's balanced out by other people calling him out for being weird, even if it's the show itself framing him as such. Next up, we have Stuart Dooley. He's funny. Now, moving on.
That took courage.
Landing just outside of our S tier and the top 10 is Lucky. Ever since he slipped on PP at the Costco and got that $53,000 settlement, Lucky thought that he couldn't get any luckier. But as it turned out, he'd go on to marry Luann, acting as a loving husband and father to her child, as well as a pretty decent guy all around. Yeah, he can take advantage of legal systems here and there, but Lucky's heart is genuinely in the right place usually. It's never brought into question how much he loves Luann, and how he'll put her above anything and everything else at the end of the day, which earns him a pretty honorable placement on our list. He might be a redneck stereotype on the surface, but his heart is no less golden than the PP he slipped on for that settlement. And without further ado, we've reached the best of the best. This is the S tier for the characters who gave a propane-powered 110%. And we're not done with controversial placements yet, because 3-time Substitute Teacher of the Year Peggy Hill is first up. Fan opinions on Peggy are very, very mixed. She's one of the most widely disliked characters in the series, particularly after Season 3. It's a widely accepted theory that after the season finale, when she survived a skydiving accident that put her in a full body cast, she suffered brain damage that led to her becoming the narcissist we all know and some of us love. Admittedly, there's a lot of moments where Peggy gets pretty grating. Her ego can cross the line from funny to downright insufferable at times, the worst of which has to be the episode where she teaches Lucky false information for his GED test, for basically no reason beyond pettily believing Luann is too good for him. But while moments like that make her pretty unlikable, she more than makes up for it with her sense of humor.
All I know is, if you had come in to find me chewing up the couch, you would not be nearly so forgiving.
Seriously, say what you will about Peggy, but she is genuinely one of the funniest characters in the show. How somebody can be so incompetent yet so confident.
I am what the magazines call a superwoman.
I like Superwoman.
Oh, Bobby, thank you.
So well-meaning yet so harmful is beyond me. She smuggled crack into prisons, nearly caused a citywide mustard gas incident, and unknowingly became a foot fetish adult film star. And all of these incidents were completely by accident, all because of how naive she is. You could easily list everything Peggy's done and frame her as a supervillain, but what makes her so funny is that she's genuinely trying to do good most of the time. All of that is in combination with the fact that Peggy is a genuinely loving, albeit flawed, mother, wife, and aunt. She is not perfect, but she has enough good points that outshine her flaws, which makes her both more likable and somehow even funnier.
In your face, boy!
I remember finding Peggy kind of insufferable when I watched the show as a kid, but when I rewatched as an adult, I found her absolutely hilarious. Now, from the meanest character in the show to arguably the sweetest, next we have Luann Platter. Oh, sweet, sweet Luann. I'll admit that in the last couple of seasons, she could occasionally border on obnoxious, and maybe even a bit materialistic, but that's nowhere near enough to detract from how sincere and sweet her character is. Luann has been hurt deeply by her parents, and when she takes the spotlight, you can tell just how hard it is for her to be a functioning adult. Nonetheless, she always tries her best. You can laugh at all the dumb mix-ups Luann has over the course of the series.
I am a proud, ignorant woman, and no one is going to change that.
But you also just feel like cheering her on because it's never brought into doubt that Luann is at least trying. While Bobby is the most blatant foil to Hank's character, Luann might be an even better one. She's young, impressionable, naive, and always wants to assume the best in people, which leads to her being taken advantage of more often than not. Whether it's by rude college housemates or creepy old pig dudes. Seriously, what the hell was that episode?
Oh, you mean sex?
No.
When Luann gets a win, it just makes you want to cheer her on more. and that makes her a breath of fresh air basically anytime she shows up. Okay, man, Dangle, tell you what, man, talking about just outside the top 5, man, Dangle Boomhauer.
Sir, you are going to have to speak more slowly. I cannot understand you.
Now, I ain't gonna lie to you, man, that old Boomhauer, straight up good old friend, man. Talking about, you know, Dangle, man's best friend. Ain't talking about no dog, man. Dangle Boomhauer. Dangle gentleman, talking ride or die friend, man. But let's move on to Hank's next neighbor, Bill Dauterive. Bill, oh boy, if Luann is a character you'll cheer on whenever she gets a win, Bill is a character who will make you hold on to that win because you know that it won't last long. Bill is an oddly realistic portrayal of depression. The guy is portrayed as an absolute loser, yet in a surprisingly sensitive way. He's fat, bald, unpopular, his wife divorced him, etc., etc. That obviously makes him the butt of the joke more often than not, but Bill still has a lot of moments where he gets to shine in his own right.
Look at me, Boomhauer. I'm fat. And I'm old, and every day I'm just gonna wake up fatter and older.
Bill is a genuinely kind man who does everything he can to care about people, even when they take advantage of him. Whether they're deadbeat dropouts trying to guilt him into being their father figure, or a group of rehab patients who need a place to live, Bill can be counted on wherever he's needed, and he's a pretty decent friend to boot. But what makes Bill work so well is that while he's lovable enough to care about him, and to root for success, he's also just creepy enough to where you can laugh at him here and there, particularly in regard to his very weird flirtation with Peggy. It's always funny to see him get his comeuppance for that, and it's nice to see that slowly become less of a prominent trait of his later on. We see much more of Bill's good side than his bad side, and at the end of the day, I just hope the revival sees him being happy once again. Landing in our top 5 is the man who's killed 50 men. Cotton Hill is up next.
You must be very proud, Mr. Hill.
Of course I am. I killed 50 men.
He's every bit as controversial as Peggy, if not more so. Aside from being a verbally abusive father to Hank, Cotton is also a war criminal, a womanizer, a deadbeat dad, and all-around angry lunatic. But with all that said, it's incredible that the show manages to write him in an occasionally sympathetic light. Whether it's humanizing his trauma from the war and how it affects him, or highlighting his redeeming qualities, the show somehow manages to make Cotton both a complete jackass and a genuinely human character. Probably the best aspect of Cotton's character is his relationship with his grandson Bobby. They get along well, and in one episode, Cotton even takes the fall for Bobby when his reputation was on the line after eating all the lutefisk at Reverend Stroop's potluck. Cotton is a massive jerk, but he knows he's a massive jerk, so he's more than willing to become the man with the terrible smell if it means keeping Bobby out of infamy.
Everybody already hates me, but Bobby, he's just a child. He's got his whole life ahead of him.
And like Peggy, or as he calls her,
Hank's wife,
even when Cotton is being absolutely horrific as a father and human being in general, he manages to be hilarious all the time. Unlike Peggy, however, Cotton has the advantage of not really being more hateable than usual in any particular episode. Probably because the show establishes from the get-go that he is just a jerk, and he never tries to prove that fact wrong. Now, this might be a bit of a hot take, but landing just outside of our top 3 is Khan. Khan is the perfect example of a lovable jerk character. He's more or less the Squidward of Rainy Street, a guy who thinks he's way better than everyone around him and lets them know it.
if I crash into your puny pickup, you get flattened like pancake.
Seriously, the petty ways Khan insults and harasses his neighbors are as hilarious as they are often creepy. Even then, sometimes he's nice enough to treat them to a free concert.
Oh, Mickey, you're so fine, you blow my mind. Hey, Mickey. Mickey, don't break my mind.
What makes Khan stand out so much is that while he's often an elitist jerk, when the chips are down, he's always there for his family. Heck, he's actually way more similar to Hank than you would think. Both of them are stuck in their ways, insist on raising their kids the way they think is best, but often push them away. But like Hank, Khan always comes around and shows that his family comes first. He pushes Connie because he wants her to have success, and when he realizes he's pushing her too hard, he does whatever he can to support her.
All your mother and I ever want for you is to be happy.
In one episode, he thinks Connie is suicidal after breaking up with Bobby, and responds by organizing constant hangout sessions. Khan is a real jerk a lot of the time, but he struggles with discrimination, manic depression, and the fear that his family will never have the luxurious life that they escaped from Laos to have. He's not a perfect man, but he's a man who loves his family through a lot of hardships. And if you ask us, that is worth a lot. Now, moving into our top 3, the bronze medal of greatness has to to go to Bobby Hill. He's got a heart of gold and the confidence of a god, which makes sense considering he's literally the Dalai Lama.
Who wants to fall in love?
But Bobby is more than a mere Buddhist spiritual leader. He's a kid who's always open to new opportunities and lifestyles.
I'm not single. I'm available.
Taking everything with an open mind thanks to the love and support of his dad. The boy may not be right, but he knows his parents love him anyway, which makes him confident enough to try new things all the time. But Bobby is just as kind to others as he is to himself, if not more so. A great example of this comes from the episode Peggy's Magic Sex Feet, in which Bobby encourages Peggy that she shouldn't feel ashamed of her big feet, and delivers a pretty iconic little speech.
What are you gonna do?
One of the main reasons King of the Hill is so great is because it has genuine heart, and more often than not, that heart comes from Bobby Hill. He makes big, hilarious mistakes, he's constantly misguided, but he learns from them, and he becomes more self-assured and compassionate as a result. And if there's one more important thing to the show than heart, it's comedy, and Bobby is still pretty hilarious. But I don't think anyone's gonna complain about Dale Gribble taking the silver medal for best character. Honestly, Dale is such an iconic King of the Hill character. The man is an unhinged lunatic who comes up with the most borderline psychotic schemes, conspiracy theories, etc. Yet he does them with such pure intentions that you can't really hate him even on his worst days. Take the episode The Trouble with Gribbles, for instance. From the outside, you'd think Dale was just being an insufferable ass to his wife, but he's actually scheming to make a case for suing the tobacco industry to pay for a facelift that she herself wanted. Dale is more of a family man than Nancy could ever deserve. From refusing to cheat on her despite a blatant opportunity with his idol, to raising Joseph like his own son, even if, as we know, Joseph is an alien.
Joseph's real father is
Nancy loves you.
an alien.
Dale is a loyal friend, husband, and father who might screw his loved ones over, but he'll do everything in his power and then some to make amends. The episode King of the Anthill sees Dale literally covered head to toe and bitten simultaneously by thousands of fire ants to save Bobby's life. Dale may be insane and selfish, but deep down he has a good heart. But what really boosts Dale to the silver is just, well, he's just too damn funny.
So long, suckers.
Whether he's coming up with the most wild mental gymnastics you've ever heard, or being blissfully unaware of his wife cheating on him with one of his best friends, even down to being convinced that said friend is gay.
John Redcorn's gay, and I've been friends with him for years.
Dale is a genuinely hilarious character, and amazingly, that comic relief is never lost in the later seasons. Dale makes an already great show even better, and just like all the other departed voice actors, we'll never forget him thanks to that legendary performance by the late Johnny Hardwick. Finally, the gold medal of greatness goes to the Mac Daddy of Heimlich County himself, Hank Hill. But first, this video is brought to you by Wicked Binge channel memberships. You can gain access to our videos early before anyone else, plus get members-only emojis and loyalty badges by supporting the channel through a membership.
I am the Mac Daddy of Heimlich County. I play it straight up, yo.
A show can only be as strong as its main character, and thankfully for King of the Hill, Hank Hill is an absolute legend. He does it all. He sells propane accessories, he has a family, who he is a gem to, by the way. Seriously, with Hank and Bobby being so incredibly different from one another, you'd be shocked just how sweet and wholesome their relationship is. Hank always does his best to support Bobby, but he also knows when to put his foot down and stop him from doing something that will get him hurt or bullied. All of that is on top of Hank himself having Cotton as a father. The fact that he ended up being such a great dad is nothing short of a miracle. But the best thing about Hank's character is that he's not perfect, nowhere near it actually. Hank is easily turned off by new cultures and alternative lifestyles, but despite all that, he always treats people with a certain level of respect and dignity. When Hank is in the wrong, the show lets you know, and it gives him the opportunity to learn and grow as a person. He's a good man and a flawed man. And on top of this, some of the situations that Hank Hill finds himself in are some of the funniest plot lines I've seen in any comedy. Having a straight arrow, uptight character like Hank thrown into situations that force him to be confronted with something new, weird, or different just works so well.
We need more of this weed and more of this dude.
And he always ends up coming out of the situations a little bit more enlightened himself. But the best ones, in my opinion, are the ones where his ignorance or naivete stop him from even knowing what he's doing. Like the time he accidentally becomes a pimp, or the time he accidentally bought crack because he thought it was fishing bait. Hank Hill is arguably the best straight arrow character in all of comedy.